Welcome to the One Take, Conversations with Global Mobility Leaders. Today I'm joined by Kelli Duehning, partner at BAL. Welcome, Kelli.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So we are recording this several weeks after GWS 2022 and a week after the U.S. elections. Both of us come from the world of Washington, where we are keenly aware of how what's in the news drives changes in government policy, which can have both intended and unintended impacts on companies. So, Kelli, I'd like to delve into some topics that are in the news today and talk about how they might impact labor migration. So, let's start with the tech layoffs. How are these impacting U.S. labor certifications and H-1B visas?
Yeah. First, layoffs or reductions in force are heartbreaking for any worker experiencing them, right? But when you add those folks that are here on a work visa, the immigration issues make it even more complex and stressful for that worker. I think from a worker's perspective, there's lots of things to consider, right? So they have 60 days to try to find another job. Or if their H-1B petition is withdrawn, what are they going to do with their dependents if they have a wife that's also working, let's say on an H4 EAD card? Or for labor certifications, that's another aspect. Questions swirling around, attestations for a bona fide future job offer that can be made, or timelines surrounding that perm after the layoff is announced. So that perspective, but I also quickly want to just say there's the company's perspective too, right? So, what obligations do companies have to communicate with their employees about the actions that they're taking, or like the level of support that companies are willing to provide to those employees, like consultations with an immigration counsel, or maybe even helping them move to another visa category. So I think, from the in-house professionals perspective, thinking about that strategy, if you haven't already needed to do so, certainly starting to think about that in this world in case you're finding yourself in that position.
So, thanks, Kelli. And we know that the U.S. government will be more closely scrutinizing kind of all applications because of these actions in the tech industry. But what do you see happening in other countries? Do all of these reductions in forces, whether they're happening in the U.S. or elsewhere, does it impact ability to get visas elsewhere as well?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's certainly something that is part of that consideration, right? If you're not able to move one of your affected employees into another visa category here in the US, certainly looking to send them to one of your overseas entities. I've not heard real specifics about whether or not the current wave of people that would need to go overseas are having any difficulty. But we do know, especially since we talked about this at the Global Workforce Symposium during our global immigration policy discussion, that there is also quite a slowdown globally to get visas, especially in the EMEA countries. Especially over the summer, we heard a lot of issues with people trying to get visas to those EMEA countries, really due in part to certainly staffing shortages and COVID issues, but also because of the conflict in Ukraine. So you have those folks who are fleeing Ukraine. You also have folks fleeing Russia. And so we're hearing a lot of slowdown in those EMEA countries with people trying to get visas to go to those locations. So I would anticipate we might see a few of that even now with these layoffs.
Yeah. So this is such a crazy labor market because despite the layoffs, unemployment remains at historic lows. Wages have gone up more than 5% in the past year, much, much more in some occupations. So if you kind of couple these labor shortages and wage increases with inflation, can companies in the U.S. continue to rely on the prevailing wage rates that they've been using, so let's say for the past year, for new applications?
Yeah, so I think that's really, really interesting question because, it's nice if you can get that safe harbor prevailing wage determination from the Department of Labor, but we all know that that takes a lot longer. And getting prevailing wage determinations right now are taking a lot longer than in the past. So I think, that means that companies now are looking at trying to do their own leveling. But that also comes with risks if you're getting that wrong. And so, it's really just making sure that you're documenting how you reach that prevailing wage determination and just being able to document that process. So that's what we've been kind of talking about in this time, just to make sure that the Department of Labor is understanding the process that you're reaching to do that. But we don't really know, so it'll be interesting to see how Department of Labor works with us during this time.
So let's stay on the topic of wages. It's never been a requirement that employers list the wage or a pay range in job advertisements during the perm process. But there's this new pay transparency law in New York. How might this impact your future perm filings?
Great. Yeah, that's a really good question. It's really unknown at this point how states or cities will enforce the pay disclosure requirement, but certainly based upon the 2002 Facebook and IER settlement notice that employers received, we know that employers cannot maintain sort of that desperate recruitment practice for their perm and non-perm positions. So there's this cross section of employment and immigration law where these new state and local job transparency laws will provide one more reason for your in-house corporate programs to reevaluate their perm programs. And really it's making sure that they look at their perm and their non-perm recruitment processes, their selection procedures to ensure that these jobs are similar, and really looking at that, making sure that the wages, the benefits, the working conditions, all of that is the same, or at least very close when you're looking at your non-perm and your perm postings. And while many companies already provide wage information during their perm recruitment on their own, or maybe even during that supervised recruitment stage, um, other companies may not be doing that. And so it's really important for them to take a look at these and understand the challenges related to these pay transparency laws, especially identifying like the appropriate way to disclose the wage, right? Updating their perm recruitment processes. How do they deal with the effects of that pay transparency that might affect their company culture? I think that's something too that, maybe it's something the company doesn't want to disclose. So how do you balance all of that to make sure that these new pay transparency laws fit within what your perm program wants to push forward? So certainly some challenges.
So we know that this is an issue in New York, but what other jurisdictions are you keeping your eye on?
Oh yeah. So we know, New York's already been enacted. Colorado's law is already actively in place as well. And so we do know Washington State and California have also passed laws that go into effect starting January of 2023. So we're really right now looking at those four areas to see how the state or the cities are going to enforce those, to see then how we should be dealing with, what we should be doing with our perm programs, to ensure that we're not violating the pay transparency laws, but certainly, making sure that it's also working within the type of perm program that you want for your company.
So I think it may just be the tip of the iceberg here in terms of jurisdictions requiring pay transparency, because many view this as an equity issue. You know, Similarly, another equity issue is the whole issue of whether college degrees should be required for a job. So, big discussions at GWS about how mobility teams are incorporating DE&I into their programs. But where does immigration and work authorization fit into this scheme when we talk about DE&I?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, I hope that most people that are listening believe that recruiting and retaining an international talent pool enhances a company's DE&I program. But certainly, the immigration professionals are finding that certain work visas are very strict on that college degree requirement. And as we're moving from that college degree requirement to, as you're saying, more of that skills based type hiring, we're finding this legal tension certainly within the H-1B program. And certainly people who are trying to have, both a, robust H-1B program, but also looking at ways to hire from within the US workforce, they're finding sort of this tension because they're not able to utilize this skill-based process, right? The H-1B program still heavily relies on a college degree. And so, I think companies are not asking the government to lessen those H-1B requirements or qualifications. I think, we want to be clear that that's not what I think companies really want. But they are hoping that the government will do sort of a no harm to the H-1B program so that they can still have that robust program, but just change the way that the requirements are so that they can also help US workers gain that valuable experience and skills in these much needed technical fields where there's also such that high demand for talent.
So just another reason why we need immigration reform, because the laws we passed in the last century just don't meet the needs of today's workforce. So Kelli, let's switch gears here a little bit. BAL was recently recognized as the Immigration Law Firm of the Year by U.S. News and World Reports. Congratulations. I imagine that your commitment to sustainability was part of that evaluation. Worldwide ERC is working with others to reduce the environmental footprint of the mobility transactions. And how is BAL contributing to this?
Yeah, ESG is a big issue to us, and we want to do all that we can to meet that global commitment to sustainable practices. So we've really looked at ways like, reducing our waste, so providing glass coffee mugs or reusable water bottles within our offices, carpooling, having our leasing space in LEED certified buildings. But I think really most importantly, and I know a lot of people in immigration can certainly feel with us on this, is championing of that move away from paper filings. So outside of printing paper, making sure that our offices are all paperless and certainly moving to that electronic format.
So, electronic filing. You worked in the DHS General Counsel's office around the time that I think I first submitted comments on e filing immigration petitions. 20 years later, little progress has been made at the agency. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, no, definitely. I was on that team in 2005, and it certainly has its challenges. I really do think, initially it was a lot of just decentralization of the program, and certainly the volume and the scale. I think what some folks don't really understand is even though the process is very similar, we can business map the processes, it's the databases that need to feed into that system, as well as all the other agencies that are going to need to utilize the information from that system, right? So USCIS isn't the only one that needs to have access to that. And so they've really been struggling with how to figure all of that out with such a large system. So, but I'm certainly really hopeful for the future. I think more specifically, if, this year, USCIS actually signed a new 5-year deal with a tech firm to basically improve their digitization of the files as well as electronic filings and adjudications. So I'm really hopeful that in these next couple of years we're going to see some really great progress. I'm a very optimistic person, so I'm looking forward to USCIS really pushing that forward. I think it would be great.
So it's great to see your optimism. So let me ask another question then. Are you optimistic that the recent elections, we just heard this morning that the House will remain Republican, the Senate is Democratic. Um, is there any opportunity for us to have Congress address those issues we faced for so long? The backlogs, the caps, the delays, DACA, uh, more money to help get electronic filing in place. Will anything change over the next 2 years?
That's the never ending question, right? So we're always hopeful that reform will pass, but I think in reality, we really don't expect a whole lot to happen. Possibly something on Dreamers. I heard this morning that there is some movement to certainly try to do something before January. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, I think what we're looking at is probably still USCIS needing to take administrative action on their own to try to be more aggressive on everything that you stated, on the electronic filings, reducing those backlogs, by ensuring that they have proper staffing numbers, maybe adding more premium processing, and certainly finding creative ways to increase those efficiencies that we've seen over this past year. I'm really hoping that USCIS continues to move in that direction so that we can at some point get to that efficient processing that we were all so used to, with the quicker processing times and certainly more consistent determinations so that we can plan accordingly for our immigration population.
So, Kelli, I share your hope that things will get better, and I know our public policy forum is working hard to help make that happen as well. So, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
Yes, actually, I would, and I know we talked about this at our booth at GWS, but we're super excited about our recent announcement on a program that we just launched called BAL Community, and it's an interactive network built by and really in for in-house professionals who want to share information and best practices, connect with each other, engage directly with government speakers or policymakers, and we think it's a little bit different than what's currently out there in that it's really created more with the mindset of helping in-house professionals manage their day-to-day immigration programs, and giving them that opportunity to engage with leaders in the field. And so we really are hoping to focus on like benchmarking and best practices and making these industry connections with especially with WERC and partnering with you all, and ensuring that we're just providing those opportunities for those immigration professionals that are in-house so that they don't feel that they're out there alone, right? I think sometimes we always feel we're out on our own, but let's work together, and hopefully BAL Community can bring us all together to really talk about these tough immigration issues.
Well, it looks good, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to continuing our conversation throughout the year.
Me too. Happy to be here. Thanks so much.